Been watching ball with my big old brain and think the tape needs some explaining. Studying the stats to understand it. Hey, yo. Talk data to me. Talk data to me.
What's up, y'all? We've got a new show for you over here at Fantasy Life. It's called Talk Data to Me. I wish I could take credit for it. I submitted about 15 different names. We dwindled it down to, there were a couple of others. I think one was Talking Ball, y'all. There was Data Take the Wheel. But my wife snuck into my office one morning and she said, I have a submission for the title of this show, Freedman. Amanda says, Talk Data to Me. So you guys heard the really cool intro? That's all my wife. I can't take any credit for that. That's actually Jake Trowbridge as well as Elias Mason. They're doing the amazing work on the audio, but it was all my wife's idea. So we have a new show, Freedman. I'm really excited about it. Talk Data to Me. This is going to be that opportunity where we get to dig into things that we don't always get to dig into at a deeper level on some of the other shows. It's also just an opportunity for us to explore, like have conversations back and forth, not necessarily that we're coming in with a right answer on some of these things. Some of it'll just be a discussion. Obviously, you know, knowing me, it's going to be pretty data oriented. Freedman, you're a pretty data oriented guy as well. But I appreciate you joining me on the inaugural show. Did I say that right? Inaugural? Yeah, I think I did. Yeah. On the inaugural show of Talk Data to Me.
Yeah. One, just try to stay away from the word groin. Two, maybe no right answers. Definitely some wrong answers. I'm going to be bringing some wrong answers for sure. And then three, I love the name Talk Data to Me. I think Poison is a really underrated, fun 80s band. And so when you told me the name Talk Data to Me, I immediately thought of Poison. And then you were like, no, it's like, it's another song. It's like, it's a rap song. I'm just like, oh, I'm old.
I thought the same thing, by the way, but when I heard it, I was like, oh, this is the one. This is the one. So our first topic today is we're going to be talking about the traits that make running backs go boom.
We like the backs that go boom. We're Dwain and Freedman, and we like the boom. We like the backs that go boom. We're Dwain and Freedman, and we like the boom.
We're going to cover some of your favorite names. We're going to have some recommendations for you. We're going to be talking about some early rounders, mid rounders, late rounders. But one of the key things we really want to do on this show is also the teaching you how to fish kind of thing. So giving you guys a little bit of a view into the back end process about how we go about coming up with these names, how we go about really honestly handling our rankings, tiers, projections. When you hear people talk about upside and things like that, we spend a lot of time, really thinking about that. So super excited to dive into all those different things, Freedman. I know that you are going to obviously want to talk about some old players. And you know what? I think it's super interesting because I think quite often, and we don't have to get into it super deep now, but I thought about it a lot for the show. Quite often, the thing that people associate with upside is just youth, right? And I think what you're going to try to tell us today is that it's not always just the young guys that can give you upside, right? And Pat Carrain did a great article on this a long time ago called Legendary Upside. If you guys haven't read it, go back and check it out. You guys all know who Pat Carrain is, but just talked about a lot of the different traits that you typically see in these very high-end running backs. So I took it a step further though, Freedman, and I applied all those same rules really against all of the running backs you could possibly apply those rules against, not just the ones that perform well. So we care about those things, but also just trying to zoom out more and just say, okay, what traits really matter? And you guys can check this out over on fantasylife.com for free. My tiers article is up. A lot of what we'll be talking through with you today is already there. But this is where I really wanted to start, Freedman. And so this is data going back to 2011. Okay. And we are talking about, actually, this says 2020. So right away, I start off wrong. This is data from 2020 to 2024. That's we use PFF data, guys. So we've got an agreement with them. But these are the running back stats that have correlated the most to running backs being successful in the following season. Okay, now I've excluded guys that got hurt and didn't at least get 150 attempts in the next year. Now they had to be hurt, right? It couldn't be because they sucked and got 150 attempts. And so tried to really make sure the sample was clean when we looked at this data. But lo and behold, Freedman, number one, It's just fantasy points scored per game in the season before, with a 0.68 correlation. So some of you are looking at this and you're like, correlation in next season. Like when we say correlation, guys, it doesn't always mean causation, but it's just what are the things that had the strongest signal when we compared it to the next season's fantasy stats. Any surprise here, Freedman, that really just fantasy points per game it just remains king.
No, it's an all-encompassing stat, and all of the other things kind of flow up into it. So it makes sense. It's like, honestly, I feel like that's actually comforting that fantasy points per game has a lot of strong signal, because if not, then we would just be playing like a much more arbitrary and random game. You know what I mean? So I think it's good that fantasy points has predictiveness year over year.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's because it's all encompassing. Also, it's because what is the thing we're trying to predict? It's actually fantasy points. And this is going to be the thing that most closely aligns with that, because we're talking about all the same factors. But we also like to dig a little bit deeper. So typically the way I start my research, Freedman, I don't know about you, is I do start with the fantasy points per game, but then I go in and I start looking and saying, okay, is this player an outlier from a standpoint of maybe they ran really hot in touchdowns? Maybe they did some things that I don't know are sustainable over time. So I start to really want to dig into what other underlying factors, how they were performing in these other areas. And so these next buckets that you guys see, these are the next data points that correlate the most strongly to future fantasy production. And you can see it's not rocket science either, but attempt share. So when we see guys get attempts the year before, quite often they get attempts the next year. Now, if there's an injury to a backfield and now suddenly the starter's back the next season, that's what causes this number to go lower, I think. And that's also happening with fantasy points per game as well. There's some different things that are occurring with this, but not surprising that attempt share, if you had a lot of attempts the season before, also a good chance that you're going to have more attempts the next season as well. But then we get into a little bit more nuanced stuff here, Freedman, one of them being routes per dropback. So you can see target share with a 0.52 correlation and routes per dropback 0.55, just slightly stronger. I would say they're in the same bucket. But the point being is you were on the field when your team was wanting to pass the ball. Yeah. And I think this, again, is making sense. Just when we talk about quarterbacks and the Konami code, you want quarterbacks that can run and throw. We want running backs that can get the rushing attempts, but they can also get that passing down work. And that's really what unlocks a lot of that upside, as well as floor when we talk about PPR and half PPR settings.
Yeah, you look at the things that go into fantasy points, and I'll just kind of give a little like quick overview of some of the things that I look at. Like, obviously, I want someone who gets raw volume. I want someone who has a goal line role. I want someone who can catch passes. And all of those are the things that you see here, like attempt share, 5-yard attempt share, and the passing game, routes per dropback, and target share. These are the things that it's not like we're saying like, oh, this is the skeleton key. Like, it's an obvious thing. These are the things that go into running backs going boom.
Oh, by the way, guys, these are the things that go into the utilization score. So when we do the research and we say, okay, what were the things that were actually the most predictive and stable? Those are the things that we put into the utilization score. So as you go over to fantasylife.com, you're checking out the utilization score. You're wondering what's in it. Number one, I've got an article up telling you about everything that's in it. But number two, like this show is also giving you the backdrop to that. And you did bring up a really interesting one there, Freedman. It's fourth on the list at 0.53 correlation. So guys, if you worked in another industry like meat, I've got a friend that works in the meat science industry, and he is in charge of technology that's around x-raying meat for companies, and actually really any kind of food products, and making sure that there's nothing bad that could kill someone, right, if they ate it. And it has to be like these numbers that they talk about are like 0.999. And when we talk about fantasy sports, whether you're talking about football, baseball, basketball, all of them are a little bit different. Some people could probably be listening to this, Freedman, and they're like 0.55. Like, what is this? Well, guess what, guys? We play a game. Yeah, they would be like, this sucks. But that's the beauty of fantasy, right? Is the fact that, it doesn't always line up. We're playing a game that the ball's not a circle. It's not round. It's an elongated sphere. It can bounce the wrong way. All sorts of weird things happen. And so when we look at these things, these are the most predictive components, but at the same time, it's not like you can use these things and say, hey, it's just a guarantee that it's going to happen the next season. But man, the inside the 5 attempt share is just huge because that means touchdowns. The majority of rushing touchdowns come from inside the 5. Yes, some aliens like Saquon Barkley can just reel off 50-yarder after 50-yarder after 50-yarder after 50-yarder, but at some point, you got to get the meat and potatoes, which is the carries inside the 5-yard line. So, for example, missed tackles for, something you heard talked about a ton in the industry, 0.59 correlation to the next season for missed tackles force, not to fantasy points, but to their ability to actually do it again. Average yards after contact, 0.58 is the correlation from 1 year to the next on that stat. But when you look at what it means for fantasy points, next season PPR correlation, so how many fantasy points they score, 0.10 for missed tackles forced and 0.13 for average yards after contact. Is that surprising to you at all?
No, it's not, because, like, we do projections and we know, like, efficiency, as nice as it is to have, it still doesn't really push the boundaries all that much on creating massive seasons. But if you create in your projections more room for rushing or more room for receiving or more goal line carries, that really can juice a guy's projection. But changing the efficiency doesn't have nearly the outsized impact. And I will say, it doesn't surprise me that year over year correlation, that is sticky, because, like, I think we do sort of see whether it's something that's inherent in the runner or inherent in the system, and that offensive line is continuous in front of him, like, whatever it is, like, you can imagine why that could be a sticky stat year over year. But in terms of fantasy impact, it's, maybe 25% of the impact for some of these other things that we're looking at. And that ratio feels kind of correct.
Yeah. And so I think the big takeaway here, it's fine to talk about it being something that you can use to look at running backs and say, okay, like what is this guy actually able to do? And you can compare him to other running backs. The thing you don't want to do, though, is overestimate the value of that to what it's going to actually mean for scoring fantasy points. What's interesting is if you go down the list and we look at the next two things, 10 plus yard attempts. So those are explosive rushes, 0.32 year over year correlation. Now, what I will say is if you go back and you look at the guys that have been really good at this, it has been a little bit stickier for that group. But despite that 0.32 correlation year over year, it's not as strong as the other two things. It actually has a stronger correlation to next year's fantasy points than the two previous things. It's just funny how some of these things work. Ultimately, what we care about most is it going to help us predict who's going to score more fantasy points the next year? And so the explosive rush rate is something that I do look at. And if you think about a lot of the biggest seasons we've seen, Freedman, it comes from guys that have had those 5-yard per carry seasons. And guess what they do? They break a lot of long runs. Like Jamal Charles, like just doing it year after year after year. Don't know how he did it. CMC's done it. If we look at Saquon Barkley last year, Jalen Hurts got 45% of the carries inside the 5. Let's be honest. We love Saquon, but if he hadn't broken off all those 50, 60, 70-yard runs, like half of them against the Rams in 2 games, like it really would have hurt Saquon last year. Here's the good news. Saquon is a very explosive player, and you put him behind a good offensive line, like really good things can happen, especially late in games when defenses are tired. And, an arm tackle's not bringing down a guy like Saquon Barkley. So that explosive rush rate is something, even though the correlation year over year is not as strong as far as like the running back owning the stat, I care about it more when I'm thinking about the range of outcomes for the player and we start thinking about upside for the next season. And then the final one, like, is the one that gets dumped on all the time, Freedman. It's just yards per attempt. It's 0.22, so it's not as sticky. The running back doesn't own it as much. And I think you brought up a really good point earlier, and part of that is the offensive line play. Offensive line play matters so much for yards per carry. Also scheme. Coordinators that can scheme up looks that keep defenses out of the box. That helps. Or just the evolution of the NFL. I'm really interested to see how much these numbers change, Freedman, over the next couple of years. Because I will say, and I wrote this up in the running back tiers piece, which people can read, go over and read again for free over at fantasylife.com. I actually put a couple of bullets in there about what might happen to some of these stats as defenses continue to encourage offenses to run the ball by putting their safety deeper, stacking the box less. They're actually saying, hey, we want you to run the ball. And against a lot of teams that works. It doesn't against the Ravens. You're screwed. It doesn't against, the Eagles. A lot of these teams that have the dual threat quarterback paired with a good running back, like it's tough to do that. But most teams don't have that. There's only so many Jaden Daniels. There's only so many Jalen Hurts. So most of those teams, we could still see like yards per attempt and all these things come up just because we're not seeing defenses play down in the box as much as we used to because they don't want to give up the big plays in the passing game.
I don't know actually how relevant this is, but while you were talking, it made me think about the 10+ yard attempts. Mm-hmm. It feels like that has a lot to do on the offensive line and the scheme. Like how effectively can the offensive line get a guy to the 10-yard point? I mean, obviously he's going to have to do some work on that, but it's not going to happen with a bad offensive line. It's going to happen more often with a good offensive line. And then from there, once a guy gets like to the 10-yard mark, the rest is on him. Like how fast can he run past the defensive backs? Like how can he outmaneuver them? But it makes sense to me that year over year correlation for that metric is lower, but that the correlation with year over year fantasy points is higher on that one. And I'll just say like in my brain, this is anecdotal, but I felt like every time I played against him, Adrian Peterson would just break off like 80-yard runs in fantasy and just absolutely destroy any chance I had of winning that matchup. Adrian Peterson, like one of the best to ever do it. I feel like he was the poster child for just breaking off long runs.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point with the offensive line play. I wrote up the offensive line rankings from PFF, and then Brandon Thorne, who does great work over at Establish the Run, recommend you guys checking out both of those things. Yeah, I think it's a mix of what we get with the offensive line as well as what we get with the player, right? I think the player has to have vision. They've got to have that the explosive traits as far as their physical gifts, the ability to, make the long run happen. To your point, you talked about speed. But we have seen some guys behind bad offensive lines actually be able to make it work. Last year, obviously, it was the perfect marriage between Saquon Barkley as well as with that Eagles offensive line. So let's take a look at what this looks like, guys, if we look historically speaking back to the year 2011. And what I've done here is I've actually looked at running back finishes in fantasy, and I broke it down into 5 buckets. If you're watching the show, you're getting a bonus because if you go read my tiers article, it only talks about the 4 buckets of running back 1 through running back 4. But I went ahead and put in an extra bucket, Freedman, here for the elite running back. So guys that finished 1 to 3 since 2011, averaged 22.3 fantasy points per game. But look at this. 70% of the carries, they're getting all the work on the ground, 63% route participation. So they're out there on the field on passing down. CMC higher than this. Alvin Kamara, we'll talk about these guys later. But 14% target share is the average. So they're getting the attempts, they're getting the targets. And notice as you start to work your way down the list, running back 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, those are the numbers that drop off the most. It's the attempts, it's the targets. This all makes sense, guys. It goes back to the first slide that we talked about. But notice what's not changing a lot. Missed tackles forced, 17% for the guys that were top 3 backs versus top 12. And it's 16% for running back 2s and running back 3s. So ultimately, they're kind of all the same. You look at yards after contact, there's a little bit of separation. 2.9 for running back 1s drops down to 2.7 for running back 2s and 3s, 2.6 for a running back 4. But the explosive rush rate, 13% for these top guys, 12% for the running back 1s, running back 4s more around that 10%. So I think like the big takeaway, like so far, like if we're just recapping, where we're at, fantasy points the year before, guys, is still the biggest thing, but you do want to like look under the hood and see what are some of the other things that are going on. Are they a candidate for negative regression versus positive regression? And I think it's okay to lean into efficiency, like really for your tiebreakers. Because if you go back and you look at the top running back seasons of all time, they're going to be guys that average 5 yards per carry. Like most of them just are. And it's because they broke off a lot of these long runs, but it's really more of a tiebreaker that you're looking at. So the next thing that we need to talk about, though, because we have to put this all into context, Freedman, is age. So prime production for running backs. And if you look at it, age 21, which is typically a rookie season, some of these rookies are 22 years old. So there's kind of a mix here. But what I've done here is I've compared the best 3 seasons of a running back's career against their age 21 season, against their age 22 season. And I did this across the entire NFL on data back to 2011. And you can see these younger guys are hitting about 71% of the prime, right? That age 21. So when you think about rookies, and sometimes they don't always immediately break out, like this is picking up that data. Sometimes the rookies do immediately break out. We're going to talk about some of them today. Age 22 though, 87%. A lot of times that's a year 2 kind of guy, Freedman, that came out early in the draft. And then if you look at ages 23 to 25, man, that's the sweet spot, 95%. Okay, so if we're trying to think about this in terms of the age groups we want to target, 22 to 27. It starts to drop off a little bit after 25. It's pretty well known in the fantasy community, right? That as you get older, you start to lose a little bit, and it hits running backs quicker than it does receivers and some of these other positions. But if you look at that, where the real drop off starts to happen, it's ages 28 to 31. But what's interesting, Freedman, is if you look at that number, it's 72%. And how people are so quick to jump off of the running backs that are older. It's really the same as the rookies.
Yeah.
As the young guys at 72% versus the 71%. So it's an interesting tidbit to keep in mind. Now, I will say, once you hit that 32 to 33 age bucket, you really do. You're now at 62% of your prime production, your best 3 years. And at age 34 plus, no surprise, 41%. There is some survivorship bias going on in these numbers, guys, for the guys that age, because obviously, like Derrick Henry's a great example. He fits in this 28 to 31 bucket. Derrick Henry's an alien that got to play with Lamar Jackson last year. So it's not that this applies to every running back, but when you think about the ones that do last, it's typically the really good ones.
Yeah.
And that's all that really matters, because guess what? You're not really paying attention to the old running back that's no longer relevant. The guys you're having to decide on are the guys like Derrick Henry, the guys like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. So I think, again, quick recap, you want the volume. We want the opportunity for the volume. Efficiency doesn't always lead to more volume, but it's a great tiebreaker. We mostly want to focus on the ability to hit those long runs. And we really want running backs typically that are between 22 and 27 years old. Those are our criteria. And so we're going to start talking about some players now, and they won't always match exactly to those. But the whole idea of the show is to talk to you guys about running backs with the traits that could go boom. So let's dive into some of those, Freedman. So here are my tier 1 running backs. We'll see if Freedman agrees with these. And we're not going to spend a long time on some of these guys, but Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, guys, you're taking one at the top of drafts, but they check all the boxes. They've scored the fantasy points already. They hit the explosive rush rate stuff. The big question with Gibbs, right, is 49% of the attempts last year. We're already hearing buzz out of camp that he is actually getting the first team reps. Those used to go to David Montgomery. I have a sneaky suspicion that we're going to see Gibbs closer to the 55, 60%. I don't have him projected that way right now, Freedman. I have him around 49% in our projections, or 50%. So right around where he was last year. But it won't surprise me at all. It's year 3. And I like David Montgomery, but if I'm the offensive coordinator, it's really hard for me not to want to give more opportunities to a guy like Gibbs.
Yeah. Let me do a really quick, just to kind of put some context on Robinson and Gibbs and the discussion for all these other guys, a quick rundown of, in addition to some of the factors that you mentioned, the stuff just kind of top to bottom, the stuff that I look at. The first is just cost. The cheaper a guy is, the easier it is for him to outperform. And then the offense that he's in. The better the offense, the more opportunities he will likely have for yards and touchdowns. And then the stuff we've talked about, pass catching, goal line roll, raw volume. And then where is he on the age/breakout curve? And then efficiency. And then this is kind of a little more amorphous, but sort of the general number of these things, upside and then downside. So how many of these avenues does he have to upside?
Right.
And then on the downside, how risky or /insulated is he on these various factors? And so I look at Robinson, obviously he's awesome. He's in the right spot on the age curve, all of these things, and the offense could get better. year over year, the offense could get better. So as great as Robinson was last year and going from rookie year to second season, he could have, I think, almost a similar jump from second year to third year. And I say the same thing with Gibbs, except it's not that the offense gets better, it's that he could have more of that rushing workload, more of the work inside the 5, all those things that David Montgomery in previous seasons has siphoned away. Gibbs could have more of that. So both of those guys, like just kind of based on the framework that I look at, both of those guys could take another step forward, which like is awesome because they already deserve to be ranked and projected this high, but there's room even here for upside.
Yeah, I did note that our own Matthew Berry, he did say that Jahmyr Gibbs was his running back too last night on the Hall of Fame game. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. I think some people are going to look at this though, Freedman, and they're going to be like, how can Barkley be 4 on this list? So we've got Bijan Robinson here, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, and Barkley are my top 4 running backs. Freedman has a different order than me, but I just look at Gibbs at 23 and a half years old, and I don't have to worry about the age curve, Freedman. Yeah, he's moving into the prime of his career. I look at that offense. It's just as good as the Eagles. Now, they did lose some people on the interior offensive line, but overall, I still feel really good about all the playmakers they have there. Yes, we also lost Ben Johnson. So there are some slight concerns, but man, the Lions are just, they have so many good playmakers, and they have a coach that's so committed to the run and Dan Campbell that I don't see a way for Gibbs to fail this year. And maybe he shares this. Here's the big thing. The guy already shared time and he can be a 20 point per game fantasy player. We also saw in the games where he didn't have to share with David Montgomery because he was hurt, Freedman, he averaged 33 fantasy points per game.
I know. It's unreal.
That can absolutely break your season, even though you're having to take him as a top 6 pick in drafts. You know, so I mean, I love Jahmyr Gibbs this year. I think the big name to talk about here is Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Folks are worried about the injury. He's going to be 29.3 years old. So he's definitely in that bucket, right? When we talk about, and I color coded these the same way as the way I color coded the slides that you looked at earlier. Again, you guys can check this out all for free, fantasylife.com. You check out my running back tiers article that went up earlier this week. So there's a little bit of risk here, you know, with CMC. But what I've seen with running backs like CMC, what's really interesting, Freedman, is how insulated that they have actually been because of the pass catching ability. And when we look at CMC, man, this is a small sample from last year. It's because he only played 3 full games. It's a 19% target share. But I don't care. I put it on here anyway because he's an 18 to 20% target share guy every year. Yeah, that's just who CMC is. And if you look at his route participation last year, 78%. He's been around 75% in all the years before that. But I want to show you guys a list of players that comped similar to Christian McCaffrey since the year 2000. So if you're at the end of round 1 and you're looking at Christian McCaffrey and that's where he goes and you're like, man, I don't know if I can do it because of the injury. I think there's just massive upside here. And hat tip to Freedman. We argued about this a little bit on a show last week. And so I dug way deeper into CMC on this research. But I'm going to give you guys a list here. So these are guys that were dual threats like CMC. They have a chance to get 60 to 70% of their rushing attempts, and they can be like a 17 to 20% target share player, but also in his same age range. So 28 to 31 years old. Let's call it their post-prime era. Priest Holmes. 31.6 fantasy points per game at age 28.9. So 29 years old. Marshall Faulk at age 28 and a half gave you 29.9 fantasy points per game in 2001. Priest Holmes did it again a year older, Freedman, at 29, almost 30 years old, 27.8 fantasy points per game. Tiki Barber at age 29 gave you 22 fantasy points per game. Here's going back. Charlie Garner at age 30. This guy came out here and gave you 22 fantasy points per game. Matt Forte, here's a more recent one. Some of you guys will actually, some of you listening to this, you youngsters, are like, who are these people? Charlie Garner, age 30, gave you 22 fantasy points per game. Sorry, Matt Forte gave you 22 fantasy points per game. Marshall Faulk, 20. Alvin Kamara, you guys all know who that is. In years 24 and 23, he gave you 19 and 18 fantasy points per game. Reggie Bush, 17 fantasy points per game. LaShawn McCoy, 17 fantasy points per game. The only guys that really failed were LaDainian Tomlinson at age 31, 2 years older than CMC now. He gave you 14 fantasy points per game. Charlie Garner at age 30 gave you 14. Charlie Garner, though, on the list a couple times here. Respect. Austin Eckler, at age 28, gave you 13 fantasy points per game. But also, man, go back to that season. Remember, he got the high ankle sprain. It totally dusted him that year.
Yeah.
So when I look at this list, there's a lot more good on here than bad. We have tons of guys we're talking about being in 18 plus fantasy point per game territory. You get him at the end of round 1, and there really is 25 point per game upside.
I know. And you look at the guys who are on this list, and they're, all pros, Hall of Famers. Christian McCaffrey perfectly fits in with that list. And so you think about the things that, like the factors that could be the reason why Christian McCaffrey doesn't work out. Okay. The cost, well, he's not that expensive. You're not drafting him as the number 1 running back this year. The offense, Brock Purdy's there, Kyle Shanahan's there. You might not have that high of opinion of Brock Purdy, but he's been in EPA and completion percentage over expectation, the number 1 quarterback in the league over the past 3 years, just in terms of what that offense has been able to do. So I think that offense is still going to be intact. I think obviously you looked at what we were able to see with the usage last year with Christian McCaffrey in his 3 healthy games. He was basically still Christian McCaffrey. The efficiency, I think he still got enough of it. I think the offense is really going to funnel through the backfield because they also have all that wide receiver uncertainty. So, man, Christian McCaffrey, very much still in on him being a tier 1 player.
Yeah, what Freedman was referencing, again, you guys can see this in the utilization report suite of tools over at fantasylife.com. Use the code Dwain, DWAIN, for 20% off. You can also use Freedman. Freedman's pretty awesome. Either one of those codes will get you 20% off. But man, in 2022, with the 49ers, 22.5 fantasy points per game. And that was only on 49% of the attempts because he had a 22% target share. And again, you talked about all the musical chairs going on in this receiver room with no Debo. Brandon Ayuk's not going to be there to start the season. Who knows how long he's going to miss. Juwan Jennings, we like. He had a good year last year, but it was a late breakout kind of guy. And then we got Ricky Pearsall, who's unproven. It could just be CMC and George Kittle, right? And it's a little fragile because they're older, but that could be the route. In 2023, this guy gave you 25.2 fantasy points per game, guys. 63% of the rushing attempts, 20% target share. And then the other thing I was showing was our average draft position tool over at Fantasy Life. You guys can check this out as well. And right now you can see CMC is the number 4 running back off the board. If I now arrange this by consensus, he's the number 5. And consensus gives you an average across ESPN, Sleeper, Yahoo, CBS, Real-Time Sports, Underdog. So I think it's a really cool feature, Freedman. But if you look at him right now on Sleeper, pick 14.
Yeah.
If you're drafting in a Sleeper draft, and Christian McCaffrey is there at pick 14. It's an absolute slam dunk. Yahoo pick 11. Really love it. I think when you play on Underdog and you got to take him at pick 7, the upside's obviously there, Freedman, but now you're having to take him over, some of the elite receivers in a format that forces you to play 3 wide receivers. So I think you definitely want him. But to your point, like the costs change a little bit. So let's talk about a couple of other players. Let's go to tier 2 here. And we're going to talk about Ashton Genty. We're not going to talk about, but guys, he's awesome and he has a dual threat. But let's talk about Achane.
Yeah.
So Achane, 17.6 fantasy points per game last season. So a player that's already shown he can do it. And man, his role really grew. Everyone said this guy's too small, Freedman. I know you talked about size earlier being, part of getting those carries inside the 5. And I think like directionally, like it can matter. But we're talking about a guy that went from getting 30% of the carries inside the 5-yard line his rookie season to 70%.
Yeah.
They just basically said, I don't care that he's small. He's really good around the goal line. You saw this for Jamal Charles. Jahmyr Gibbs has been really good around the goal line. So, guys, when you hear people argue that just because a guy is not 210 pounds, they won't get those carries. Austin Eckler's another one. Austin Eckler, I know, is rocked up now, but when he came into the league, he was not that big, guys. There are a lot of running backs that have been really good at getting the carries inside the 5-yard line and punching it in that are not 220 pounds.
Yeah.
And when I look at the Dolphins, like I like some of the other guys behind Achane, but do I see anyone that I think is gonna take those carries inside the 5 away from him?
No. And I mean, you just look at all the things. He's got the pass catching. Last year he had the goal line role. I think he's going to have volume this year because I don't really trust the guys behind him. He's, relatively cheap. Like he's got number 1 overall ceiling, but you're not having to pay for that. You're not having to draft him in the top 3. And then that offense could be better as long as Tua stays healthy. And I know that's a big if, but as long as Tua stays healthy, I mean, Achane crushed last year in the games where Tua was healthy. If Tua is healthy for the super majority of the season and Achane gets even more work, he could absolutely smash. So I'm with you on Achane here, like him very much.
Yeah, I mean, and to your just point real quick, he improved guys in every category. Snaps went from 42% to 62%. All the people saying this guy's never going to get a full-time role. 62% of the snaps, if you think back, and we talked about rushing attempts and all those things, I didn't have snaps on there, but 62%, that's a running back one.
Yeah.
If I had snaps on those tables I was sharing with you. Rushing attempts went from 34 to 48%. So they're still not completely loading him up in that department, but the attempts inside the 5, which are important. I lied. I said it went from 30% to 70%. It went from 23% to 70%. Route participation went from 45 to 61. Targets went from 11% to 15%. Fantasy points went from 16.6 to 17.6. So needless to say, we absolutely love Achane. We think that he's got the things that you're really looking for as far as being that dual threat kind of player. So Freedman, let's go to another player here. You and I, we kind of debated him a little bit already once this offseason, but it's Bucky Irving. Very explosive playmaker last year. 13% of his carries went for 10 plus yards. And he's a guy that when you watch it, like you just see it. You're like, this guy that makes one cut and then uses his acceleration just to take away the angle from the linebacker or the safety. He's a guy that he's not that big, so he kind of fits in that Achane kind of mold, kind of Jahmyr Gibbs mold. The biggest knock on him right now is the competition that he has for routes. And Rachaad White is a guy that is, as much as he hasn't been an overall good running back in the NFL, that's been the thing he's been pretty good at. Rachaad White has been a good receiver out of the backfield. However, my thesis on Bucky Irving is like, look, guys, he's really good. And just like we shouldn't assume last year, you shouldn't have assumed that Achane was never going to get the carries inside the 5. I don't think we should assume that Bucky Irving doesn't see more passing down work. It's something that he actually did okay in college. And last year when he was given his opportunities, he also did really well with those opportunities. So they could easily, man, just push Rachaad White to long down and distance duties, which is fine. You don't even care if the running back honestly is on the field that much for those, because mostly you're blocking. It's 3rd and 8, and the opposing defensive coordinator is manning up and sending a blitz. He's saying, we can cover these guys long enough in man coverage, and the blitzer's going to be in your face and either make you move, throw the ball away, or you're going to take a sack. And so fine, Rachaad White needs to be out there blocking on those plays. I don't care. It's the 2-minute offense that we care about. The 2-minute offense is we're trying to get down for a field goal or score at the end of the half or at the end of the game. And I think that's a spot where we could see Bucky Irving pick up more work this year. And I just a really good player, Freedman, in an offense that we really like with a good offensive line. I know Tristan Wirfs, we might have to wait a little bit on him, but I feel like you talked about earlier, all the things you can stack up for a player.
Yeah.
Man, dude, talent, yes. Ability to be better in the passing game, yes. Offensive line, yes. Good offense, probably going to regress some guys. Baker had a career year. It's going to be hard to keep it up, but overall, it's an offense we like.
I don't disagree in principle with a lot of what you said. Like the ceiling is certainly there. Like he has, in terms of like the upside, like avenues to having a monster season. He's got that. I would also say he's just not insulated. Like it's a little more of a projection because he has to compete with Rachaad White. Now, if he can beat him out, and like I think he can beat him out, it's just he has to beat him out. If he can beat him out, then he has a massive season ahead of him. But also, you mentioned the offense, and for me, the offensive environment is really important. Like if that's not right, it's hard for a guy to overcome that and put up a monster season. It's possible, but it's just a really big barrier. And I do think we're going to see some regression, in part just because Baker has run so hot the past 2 years. It would be hard for him to match. Like he could have a good season and still not match what he did last year, but they have their 4th offensive coordinator in 4 years with Josh. And like, we should not assume he's up to the level of Liam and Dave Canales before him. So if there's some offensive regression across the board, and then Bucky Irving doesn't fully overtake Rachaad White or like fully push him to the sideline, then I think it's going to be hard for him really to break fantasy.
So like, here's my thing. We would have said the same thing about Raheem Mostert last year for Achane, keeping the carries inside the 5. I just think that
Yeah.
Bucky Irving is such a great bet because Rachaad White's not very good. Like he's fine
That's
as a
fair.
passing down guy, but he's like, really, do you want to, like, I try to put myself in the shoes of these coaches and it never works. So take it with a grain of salt. But Bucky Irving is the guy that if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm worried about being on the field.
Can I ask a question? Is Bucky Irving in the same class as Devon Achane? Like, I view Achane as being like a different type of specimen. Like, I think I look at him and I think this guy has Chris Johnson within his range of outcomes. I don't look at Bucky Irving and think that.
I think that Bucky Irving does have that. I don't think he has the same top end speed, but if we look at his explosive play rate, 13% in his first year, that was right there with Achane. You look at his yards per carry over 5. And right now, guys, you can see on the screen, I have the utilization tool, the game log view up, and you notice how I just isolated down to week 12. I didn't do that to be arbitrary. That's when they came out of the bye week and they gave the starting role to Bucky Irving. He averaged 17.2 fantasy points after that. But notice we've got a week 14 game in here where he played 17% of the snaps because he got hurt. So like if I just isolate it, a little bit further and we take it down, to week 15, we still got the 16.2 fantasy points per game. But the thing that's super encouraging to me, Freedman, is look at what they did with him in crunch time when they were trying to make the playoffs and in week 19 in their wild card game, 70% and a 68% snap share.
Yeah.
They gave it all to Bucky Irving. Why? Because he's the guy that the defense doesn't want on the field. He's the guy that gives you the best chance to score. So, and also, if you look at his targets per route run, 21%. So he wasn't on the field for all the routes, to your point, 36% on the season, but that did get up to 42% down the stretch run, got over 50% of those in one of the playoff games. You need to see him get the 2-minute offense. And who knows if they'll ultimately give that to him. They may not. But, man, I'm just not going to let Rachaad White keep me off of him because I think that Bucky Irving actually is a pretty similar comp to what we have with Achane.
Okay, that's fair. And if that's the case, then I'm way too low on Bucky Irving.
Yeah. Again, here's the good news. They let Rachaad White keep the passing down role last year, and we saw him average over 17 fantasy points. That's not bad. Yeah. Even if the offense, to your point, I think we both agree on the regression there. It's still relative to all the other offenses. It's still in the top 10 for both of us, probably in the top 8 for both of us.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. So Bucky Irving, let's talk about some more players here. Look at me. I'm getting better at this hosting thing, Freedman, and being able to transition more smoothly. A guy I know you wanted to talk about here, a couple. Well, number one, ride or die.
Yeah.
Mr. Matthew Berry, Amari Hampton. I've got him in this tier. I've essentially been taking Amari Hampton at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah. Now I'll just say quickly. Now I just mandatory, company policy. I have to move Amari Hampton up my rankings now. I have to bump him up in the projections. Absolutely must. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like, he's a really good player. He graded out really well in the supermodel. The thing he's not great at is he's not a great receiving back, but he's a capable receiving back. And if I think about the Chargers and I look at who do they have? They have Conkey. That's the only proven weapon. Now they drafted Trey Harris in round 2. We've got Lambert Smith doing his thing in the preseason, making all this training camp buzz, but he's a round 5 pick. We've got Quentin Johnston, who's been a disappointment to this point in his career. I do think in this kind of offense, you could actually see a guy, get like Amari Hampton, get a 12% target share. And I've also heard the thing around Greg Roman, which is true. Historically, he hasn't targeted his running backs. But if you go back and look, that's Colin Kaepernick. Yeah. He had a 10% scramble rate. And then it was Lamar Jackson, who had a 9.5% scramble rate. Justin Herbert, 4.5% scramble rate for his career. So is it some the coordinator? Yeah. But it's also some that you had quarterbacks that were willing to take off and scramble. That's not Justin Herbert. So if we don't have a big step up by Trey Harris or one of these other guys, Amari Hampton, guys, he could get to a 12 to 14% target share as like the third option in the passing attack. Now, Najee Harris, unknown with the eye thing. We don't have to, we've talked about that on other shows, but I definitely think the raw talent profile is there for Omarion. And with Najee not there, man, at every rep he gets to impress coaches, I think the further along we are from not having to worry about Najee.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned cost as one of the things that I look at is like the first thing is because the higher up a guy's ADP is, the more cost conscious we need to be, the more we need to really think about like floor in addition to ceiling. But I think we are now at the point a little bit further down in ADP where it's okay for us to take some bigger swings. And Hampton's ceiling is massive. He doesn't have as sure of a floor because of Najee Harris. But if he's able to beat out Harris within that offensive environment, behind a good line with an offensive coordinator who really wants to run the ball, Hampton could absolutely smash. So the upside for him is massive. And he's like on that perfect part of like the breakout curve where even though he's a rookie, year one, he could have, like a 1,500 yard season.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for Najee is going to be if he's not ready for the season start and Hampton just goes bananas in 2 or 3 games, it's going to be, what's the point?
Right.
And we don't know that Najee, we really don't have any clue how bad this injury is. What we do know is he's not practicing at all. He's at least with the team, but we don't have a lot of details. And I don't think we're going to get any from Harbaugh. He's not.
What we know is the dude has an eye injury and is wearing sunglasses all the time and is not letting anyone see his eyes. That on its own, I don't want to be like a conspiracy theorist, but that's pretty significant.
Yeah, very significant. And I'm showing you guys the ADP tool again here. Amari Hampton pick 45 consensus. That's moving up though rapidly. And Mr. Barry will help that. He's going to escalate that even more because a lot of you are you know that that's the ride or die now. So he's going to be moving up. I'll tell you this: I've already been selecting Amari Hampton in round 3. What would be the point, Freedman, where Hampton got pushed to an ADP of X? You're out.
Middle of round 2.
Me too. I think Jonathan Taylor is actually the guy that's most similar to Amari Hampton.
Yeah.
Not a great receiver, but can be a receiver in a pinch if you don't have all the other weapons. A big guy that can score the touchdowns. He can break the long runs. We like the offensive line for the Chargers, just like we kind of do for the Colts. We have coaches that are committed to the run game. I think they're really similar. And so I'm with you. I think Amari Hampton, you could make an argument for him as high as putting him one spot ahead of JT. But that I'm with you, mid round 2. I'm taking him right now in round 3, pretty much all the time. Maybe too much. But my concern is he is going to keep moving up, and I want to get as much of him as I can right now. Yeah. All right, so let's keep moving along here. And this is the beauty of this show, guys. We can actually stretch our legs out and we can keep talking through some of these things. So we got a couple of other guys in this tier. Chase Brown, talk to me, Freedman. Just real quick, what you guys see on the screen. Prime age, guys, 24.8 years old, 15.9 points per game last year. But once he took over that starting role, he absolutely went nuclear. And Zach Moss was just released from the team, but he had 68% of the attempts last season. And he had 11% target share. So talk to us about what you like about Chase Brown.
Yeah. At cost, he has top 3 upside, but you certainly don't have to draft him with that kind of capital. If we extend what he did last year as a starter across a whole season, he absolutely smashes. Great offensive environment with Joe Flacco there. And he's a competent enough pass catcher, not like a great pass catcher, but competent enough as a pass catcher where even though the team brought back Samaje Perine, who will still some of the pass catching role, I still think Chase Brown is going to get enough of it. And honestly, I think it's a good thing that Samaje Perine is the guy behind him because that means he's not really going to challenge all that much for a chunk of the rushing workload and for the goal line work. So I think Chase Brown is locked into a really good situation.
So just real quick, got to show off the utilization report again. So weeks 9 through 17, week 8 was the last week we had Zach Moss. This man averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game with a utilization score of 95. The highest that you can get is 100.
Unreal.
So I will say this. With Chase Brown, I'm with you. Samaje Perine doesn't worry me. Like, just give Samaje Perine the long down and distance work and let him block. I don't even care. I just want Chase Brown to keep the 2-minute offense because he had 82% of that. The 2-minute offense and carries inside the 5 and PPR and half PPR leagues are the 2 highest leverage utilization components that you can have for a running back because of how often the running back gets targeted in that scenario because defenses are playing way off. They're basically saying, throw the ball to your running back. And so if you have timeouts and you can quickly get out of bounds, then quarterbacks will do it. They'll be like, fine, 7 yards, 7 yards, 7 yards. That's how you guys go and you look at your box score for a player like Chase Brown, Austin Eckler, CMC. You're going into halftime. You're like, man, I only got 6 points. And then, you're in the last 2 minutes of the half and suddenly he has 11 points by halftime. He doubles his score. It's because of the work in the 2-minute offense. It's absolutely huge for PPR work. So Chase Brown, really good player. My Spidey senses are slightly going off with him, Freedman. I'm not too worried about the competition behind him, but I do think he's kind of close to a dead zone archetype back just because it's not like he was that great. He scored a lot of fantasy points, but it was mostly on volume. He didn't give us the big plays that we expected for the speed that he has. Didn't break a lot of tackles, was okay after contact. And again, these things don't always mean you get more touches. That's the other thing I've studied, guys, is not just correlating those things to future fantasy points, but does it mean you get more or less touches the next year? And those correlation numbers are low as well. But just enough of my Spidey senses going off here. He's a round 3 pick, so, yeah. I mean, he's around 3 pick in drafts, doesn't have a ton of draft capital, not a lot of competition, but historically that's kind of been the recipe for running backs that we think have it made. And then suddenly we're like, oh my God, like I don't have what I thought. Now, Taj Brooks is his main competition. So friend of the show, Matthew Waldman, you guys haven't checked out the RSP, you should. Like, he loves Taj Brooks, one of his favorite running backs in the class. So just tuck that name away as a late round flyer. Yeah,
I mean, he's a late round flyer. But I will say, I mean, in all respect to Waldman, whom I love, and Taj Brooks, but he's a 6th rounder. Like, he's a 6th round rookie. Like, I'm just kind of not that worried about it. And also, to your point about Chase Brown not being that efficient, he's basically Joe Mixon. And the Bengals showed for years that they were willing to feed Joe. They were willing to have
that's true.
a running back get a lot of volume despite not being efficient.
Good, excellent counterpoint. Excellent counterpoint. Okay, let's move forward. And Breece Hall. So Breece Hall, guys, I know he did you wrong last year. You took him in the first round of fantasy drafts, but guess what? He does the things we want. He had 65% of the rushing attempts. We have a totally new coaching staff. We've got Aaron Glenn coming over from the Lions. Everyone's connecting the dots on this, Freeman. Everyone can see that it's going to be Breeland Allen now taking over the David Montgomery role. Guys, come on. I'm not saying it won't happen. I am not saying that this won't happen. But Breeland Allen, 5% of his carries went for 10 plus yards last year. Breeland Allen can't force a missed tackle to save his life. Breeland Allen, when I saw the quotes from Aaron Glenn, he said, he's big. He's 240 pounds and he can fall forward. Okay, great. I can say that about any 240 pound back in the NFL. We've got a few clips going viral from camp, really against no one. And again, I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm just telling you guys right now, Breece Hall is on another level when we talk about talent versus what we have with Breeland Allen. Now, maybe they do want to bring over the Lions, scheme. But here's the thing, Freedman, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Gibbs was an early round pick. And guess what? They had already paid David Montgomery that offseason. They brought him in as a free agent and paid that man. Breeland Allen, they don't have high draft capital tied up in this guy. They don't have money tied up in this player. When I look at Breece Hall, explosive rush rate of 12%, 14% target share. This is the profile we want. It might not go perfectly our way. The beauty is he goes in round 3 and 4 of drafts. Even if Breeland Allen takes over larger work, we could still see Breece Hall succeed because he catches passes and he gets work in the ground game. But Freeman, if he gets the workload that he had last year, he's most likely going to outperform his ADP. It's very likely. And he has the two things you want. He's shown that he can carry the workload on the ground, and he's shown that he can earn targets.
Okay. I hear everything. First of all, Breeland Allen, you give me just a few more pounds, I can be 240 and fall forward. So, but I will say with Breece Hall, I hear everything you're saying. This is going to be a player that we have a pretty big divergence on. And I don't actually really disagree with the fundamentals of what you said, but the offensive environment, I think, is just, it could be really bad. The Jets could run maybe the fewest plays in the league this year. You have a quarterback in Justin Fields who is a scrambler and is less likely to be throwing the ball to Breece Hall. And also Justin Fields in the design run game might take away some of the volume from Breece Hall. So there are just so many kind of factors that I look at and I'm like, okay, the offensive environment not be great. Breece Hall, he's not super expensive, but he's also not cheap. He's an ace in the pass catching game. You got to give him that. But maybe he loses some of the goal line work to Breeland Allen. Maybe he doesn't get as much raw volume as we want. You put all that together and I'm just thinking like, man, this is a guy that I just don't want to draft because I can see how a lot of things go wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, when I wrote it up over in the tiers, I wrote my biggest concern for Hall is I have this offense projected for the third fewest touchdowns.
Yeah.
That's not good for a running back. However, I'm not that worried about Fields inside the 5. I think he'll take some of those, but we're not talking about Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. He doesn't get that kind of workload. But if he poaches a few, and to your point, Breeland Allen poaches a few, then that becomes a problem. So where I stand on Hall is I think it's all priced in, because once you get to round 4 of your drafts, every player you're looking at pretty much has questions.
Yeah.
You're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. Got a lot of questions, guys. I mean, you're looking at a lot of receivers that have questions. You're looking at other running backs that have questions. And so once I get to that point, I want the guy that's shown me that he can handle the full workload on the ground and he can also earn targets. And by the way, has been an explosive playmaker. So funny. People talk about how Breece Hall is not explosive when, he was one of the most explosive backs in the league last year at 13%.
Can I ask a question? This is sort of like getting back to the old school RotoViz arbitrage days. Like, why would I draft Breece Hall when I could just wait a little bit longer and draft DeAndre Swift?
Oh, I think Breece Hall is a much better player than DeAndre Swift. A. B, my answer to a lot of those kind of questions is if I really like players, I don't mind drafting them both.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to build the best team. And sometimes that means I have to play the ADP game. And I may, even if I may value 2 players similarly, that doesn't mean I can't take the other one earlier in the draft, unless I want to spend a pick on something else. I will tell you this. I take Amari Hampton a ton in round 3, and I take an elite quarterback in round 3 or 4 all the time. And the reason why is all the questions around all these guys. So for me with Breece Hall, like he just has a unique combination that most running backs don't. It's very rare that you find a player that can give you 60% of the rush share and also potentially give you a 16-17% target share. So I hear you on the scrambling with Fields. The challenge is outside of Garrett Wilson, they have no one. So I think that partially insulates like the catching role for Breece Hall. Is Justin Fields going to take off? Yeah, absolutely. But after you look for Garrett Wilson, who's next? Josh Reynolds, Alan Lazard. I mean, Mason Taylor, we hope as a rookie, like Breece Hall could still legit be like the number 2 or 3 target on the offense.
Yeah.
Again, I'm with you. The offense I don't like very much, but I think it's pretty well priced in. Breece Hall was going around 1 of fantasy drafts last year because of his skill set. And now because the offense sucks so bad, you can get him in round 4.
That's fair.
So, all right, let's go to the next group, Freedman. All right. Kenneth Walker, a guy that this is so interesting because coming out of college, the whole vibe, everything about Kenneth Walker is he can't catch passes. No, guys, there's a difference between not being given the opportunity to catch passes and actually not being able to do it. Tank Bigsby, you might be able to say at this point, can't catch passes. He actually did it some in college, but it looked terrible at the NFL level. It literally looks like they pulled a fan out of the stands and like just shoved him out there and put a uniform on and, asked him to catch a ball and it just went badly. But
man,
when you look at Kenneth Walker,
the Tank Bigsby strays, I'm going to have to take him off of the list of guys I was planning on talking about.
No, I think Bigsby's a value at ADP. I just think he's not a pass catcher. Right. Yeah. And so the main thing I'm looking for with these guys is someone that can do both things. And Kenneth Walker checks that box. He had a 14% target share last year, guys. That's running back one worthy, 66 or 68% of the rushing attempts, 16.5 fantasy points per game. Obviously, you got Zach Charbonnet there. They spent a round 2 pick on him. But, I mean, we've had a couple of years now. Now, we do have a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak. I think that could be a potential gain, Freedman. We're going to have more wide zone plays. If you guys have watched Kenneth Walker play football, this man is built for wide zone. This guy is built for, I'm going one way, just kidding. I've got a crazy stop, start, one jump cut, and I can now hit the backside of this play and really be gone to the races. Like, that's totally in his range of outcomes. Not only an 8% explosive rush rate last year was down, but if you look at him the 2 seasons before, it was really good. So I think some of that's dealing with injuries, but Kenneth Walker. And if we look at the ADP tool, I'll pull that back up over here. Got to see where Kenneth Walker is going right now in drafts. Kenneth Walker, Freedman.
Yeah. One thing I'll add on Kenneth Walker, that offensive line for the Seahawks, it's been really bad
42.
The past few seasons, and it might be a little bit better this year.
Yes, they've had the 2 tackles. They just haven't been able to stay healthy. And now they made upgrades to the interior. And also Kubiak, also known for being a guy that's very committed to the run. So, I mean, Kenneth Walker right now, guys, pick 42. So you're getting him as the running back 16 off the board. Breece Hall's the running back 14. Okay, Freedman, let's finish up, but let's just talk about a few guys. We won't, I'll stop. I may decide to slide share again, depending on who we talk about. But let's talk about some guys that go later in the draft that you like, that you think check some of these boxes.
So I can just rattle off some names. Charbonnet, I like is like the pure handcuff for Kenneth Walker. And I think Walker's awesome, but he does have to deal with Charbonnet, who's good enough to steal a little bit of the work. And then if Walker goes down, we have seen Charbonnet basically absorb so much of Walker's role. So Charbonnet as a guy that you can get later, you can't really use him so much in the flex, but as a pure handcuff, I like him a lot. If Walker were to get injured, DeAndre Swift, I mentioned him earlier, 3-down player. So I think he has some good insulation there. I don't think much of his competition. And then the offense for the Bears could be much better. So I am interested in DeAndre Swift quite a bit. I will say probably a little
Charbonnet,
higher.
man, 18.7 points per game in 6 contests without Walker.
Yeah.
So yeah, you talk about a guy, I've got him as a running back 4 with contingent running back 1 upside.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so,
Pacheco, I want to mention Isaiah Pacheco. So remember, like offensive environment, really important to me. The offense for the Chiefs could be much better this year. We have seen Pacheco in the past be like a competent enough pass catcher, assuming he can seize back control of the backfield and really be the lead back there. If the offense improves, then it could just be like, oh, this is the Isaiah Pacheco that everyone was so bullish about a year or 2 years ago. So I'm interested in Pacheco. And then 2 more names.
Pacheco, real quick, while we're looking at it, I got the utilization report pulled up. 16 fantasy points per game over those first 2 weeks before he got the injury. If we go back to 2023, I've got to expand it real quick, but this just kind of showing off what you guys can do with the utilization report on the game log view. So he took over the starting role in week 4. That's when he got to that 64% route snap share. So if I just take that and look at week 4 and on, as in the year before,
an
Pacheco averaged
an 82 utilization rate.
82 utilization score, 16.6 fantasy points per game. I will say I'm a little nervous. There is a lot of talk out of camp about the younger players, about the explosiveness of Elijah Mitchell, Brashard Smith playing passing downs. Elijah Mitchell getting compared to the Jerick McKinnon role. You've got Kareem Hunt, man, like, fine, whatever. I'm not really worried about that, but I'll say my worries are growing a little bit for Pacheco versus where I was like a week or 2 ago. But obviously, like, again, price where you're getting Pacheco right now. If we're looking at average draft position, Pacheco, not even in our first screen of 25 guys. So where is he? Sorry, this is really great showmanship here. 27. Running back 27, pick 73 in your draft.
And that's the thing with Pacheco. I think the price is right. Given the upside of that offense and the role that he could have within the offense. And then 2 more names that catch my eye. Ramondre Stevenson. So he's probably got the goal line work. I am skeptical that he will get the pass catching work, but he can catch the ball. For like a bigger guy, he does have that ability. So whether or not he actually gets that work, we know that he can do it. And then the offense for the Patriots could be significantly better this year with the return of offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels and the maturation of second-year quarterback Drake May. So Ramondre Stevenson as a guy available really late.
We're different on him. Like I have him as a low end running back 3, but the fantasy points have just basically gone down 14-8, 12-3, 11-9. His yards per route run have become non-existent. Like early in his career, like he was really good as a receiver. Now, again, guys, some of this could just be variance. Like we can get variance in these small samples. My big concern is like Trevion Henderson is like so explosive.
Yes.
Like I feel like he has the shot to get the 2-minute offense, the most valuable part. I could see them letting Stevenson do the blocking. I agree. Stevenson could get some of the carries inside the 5. Maybe he's even the lead guy in that role. Trevion didn't really do that in college, but I don't think we should make the assumption that he doesn't here. So I'm not that in. So here's what I would say with Stevenson. I don't think you're going to like starting him every week. I think the only way you're going to like playing him is if something happens to Trevion Henderson. Whereas with Trevion Henderson, I think he can make enough big plays that like you can live with it. You can be like, well, I might get 5, but next week I could get 30 because he breaks off all these long plays. Stevenson, I worry that it's like, oh man, I got the good week this week and it was 13 points. And then next week I get 5. Again, a challenging offensive environment. Like we're making a lot of assumptions, with the Patriots. Yeah. But what I will say is this is a guy that, in the past has flashed, some nice underlying talent. I just wouldn't put him in the category of running for me, like with the criteria I use as running backs that could make my season, that could go boom and change my season. I think he certainly needs an injury to Henderson. And even then I don't know that I would. So say Trevion Henderson gets hurt in week 3. Are we even ranking Ramondre Stevenson as a running in the top 12? Cause he had that role last year. And even though he ran hot to start the year, we didn't like him.
We're probably not ranking him in the top 12, but I think he would be in the top 24. And I know like that probably doesn't like quote unquote boom, but like if we're drafting him as the running back 40, I think there's value there. And then I'll say an injury to Trevion or just Trevion not being as good as we anticipate, or Trevion being good, but actually just kind of getting Josh McDanieled and not really getting the full workload that he maybe should and commensurate with his talent. So I would say, I think there are multiple ways in which even if Henderson doesn't get injured, Stevenson could actually get more work than we would expect.
Cool. Yeah. So a guy Freedman's drafting, a guy I don't want to draft.
All right. And then one more guy I'll mention here, Jaden Blue, more exciting, a much more exciting player. The Cowboys totally remade their backfield this year. You have the 2 veterans that they brought in and Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. And then you had 2 rookies, Jaden Blue being one of those guys. Of the 4 new guys who have a shot to do something in the backfield, he's the one who's most intriguing to me. He's fast. He's young, 21 years old. I thought he was pretty impressive in his final season at Texas. I think he can run and he can catch. And then he's starting to get some first team work. Now, I don't, who knows what that means. Like,
no, but it's not bad.
You would rather have him get first team work than not get first team work.
We went from a coach that's not with the team saying that he was lazy. To now he's getting first team reps. So Jaden Blue early in the, about 3 weeks ago was my most drafted running back. And I honestly let social media push me off of it. And that's the thing. Like, guys, we have our takes, we have our research, but like, we still like are hearing all these things. But Jaden Blue, I agree with you. I've already moved, like when I published the tiers for running backs, I had him below. I've already moved him back up above them. Like he's the guy that I would draft. Miles Sanders is the other one I would draft just because he goes at the very end of your draft. Like I'm not drafting Javonte Williams. I'm either taking Jaden Blue or I'm taking Miles Sanders. That's the way I'm playing the backfield. But Jaden Blue does the things that we've talked about. He's an explosive playmaker, very fast, and he can catch passes out of the backfield on a team that's identity, most likely Freedman, is going to be throwing the ball all the time.
Yeah.
So, and talk about like CD Lamb and George Pickens, you're already having to worry about that. And now Jaden Blue is coming out of the backfield on like a Texas route. Like he's just not going to be covered. he's going to be open and he's going to be in space. So I love the call on Jaden Blue. I'll throw a couple of others in here. I'm going to stick with explosive playmaking and guys that can catch passes. That's really the two things that I'm looking for now, because these are guys that are obviously not locked into starting roles. But what I want are players that if they suddenly found themselves in the starting role, they could give you the things we talked about with Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane. I'm not saying they're going to be 1-for-1s for them, but these are similar archetype players. Tajay Spears, man, is number one. This guy should not be going like 4 or 5 rounds different than Tony Pollard. I actually think he's the better player than Tony Pollard right now. And we've also heard the coaches say they want to split the time. Last year, they were both injured. It never worked out where we could fully test the thesis of if it was a true 1A or 1B. What I do know is Tajay Spears, the underlying data for both of his first 2 seasons has been great. Okay. He had a 14% target share last season, 11% explosive rush rate last year, again, battling injuries. The year before it was 13%, right? So up in that high end running back 1 territory. So he can break those long runs and he can do it in the passing game. And from weeks 15 to 17 last year, they basically gave him the starting role instead of Pollard. 20.7 fantasy points per game over that 3-game stretch. I get it. It's a small sample size, but the underlying data points, when I see them and what I thought about Tajay Spears already, and then I see those fantasy points, it does not surprise me. And guys, this is not a 185-pound back. This is a guy that, yeah, he's short, but he's also thick. They've used him around the goal line. I don't think Pollard's a lock to get the carries inside the 5. So I think it's going to be a split backfield. I don't know for sure which way it's going to go. I think the early lean is probably fair to give it to Pollard, but Spears could actually take over the starting role. That's an out. B, if Pollard goes down, Tajay Spears is going to be, he's going to be really good. He's going to score you a lot of fantasy points. And the Titans are another offense, Freedman, where after Calvin Ridley, we have all question marks.
Yeah.
I wish they would ever give Chigo Okonkwo a full-time role. I actually like him. But like Alec Iomanor, don't know. We've got Chicory Dickory Dyke or whatever his name is out of Florida, like their 5th-round draft pick. Xavier Restrepo, who ran like a 7.0 flat 40-yard dash. So there's not, it's basically Ridley, and then it might just be the backs, and Callahan has shown he schemed up the backs in the passing game last year. So if you suddenly got Tajay Spears, I'm gonna do Cam Scatteraboo
one more thing quick on Spears to touch on the offensive environment, which you mentioned there. The offense should be better than it was last year. I would expect like you have another year of Brian Callahan as a play caller. Like last year was his first year as a play caller while being his first year as a head coach. That's tough. So I think he should be a better play caller. They have a better quarterback in Cam Ward, and they've helped rebuild the offensive line a little bit with some of their offseason additions. Left tackle Dan Moore, right guard Kevin Zeitler. I think that offense should be better in general. So all the more opportunities for yards and touchdowns.
So if you guys are looking at the screen, you can see it. If not, there's a range in the tiers right now where Tajay Spears, we just talked about, but Cam Scatteraboo and Dylan Sampson, those guys, I like all of them. Scatteraboo, 16% target share in his best season, and was actually just a great target earner over his entire career. 18% of his carries in college went for 10 plus yards. He also is a guy that can work inside the 5, Freedman. I think Tyrone Tracy obviously had a good season, so I can't tell you that Scatteraboo is going to come out here and take the job away from Tracy. I like Tracy as well, but Scatteraboo, the one problem with him is some people just love him. Ian and I were in a draft on Real Time Sports. He went in round 7.
It's so hard to get him because someone is always going to want him more than you do.
You got a Kendall Valenzuela. Kendall is the biggest Scatteraboo fan. So if you're ever in a draft with Kendall, you're not getting Scatteraboo unless you want to take him super early. Dylan Sampson, another name I want to bring up, wasn't uber productive in college, split time most of the time, but he played with Jalen Wright, who was a 4th-round pick the year before. Was he 3rd round or 4th round the year before? He was a 4th round, but didn't they trade a 3rd?
They traded a 3rd round to get him.
Yeah. So Sampson did have some competition in college, but man, if you had to make a bet on one player that might not play this season in the NFL that we thought was going to be playing and it's not due to an injury you've already heard of, is it not Quinshon Judkins?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And Lance Zierlein loved this guy. And when I watched him, I'm not a film expert, but just a natural feel. Watch guys, just go watch him. Just go watch him set up the next level defender, watch the burst, all those things. Very Bucky Irving-esque. Also a guy that not necessarily a down the field target, but man, if you scheme him stuff up around the line of scrimmage, this dude could be the starter for the Browns in week 1. Jerome Ford is another name worth mentioning. Like he's been a pretty good dual threat guy. but Sampson has that explosive playmaking. And I'm going to do one final one. Guys, saved it for last, but I can never quit him. And it's Jaylen Warren. They drafted Caleb Johnson, but Jaylen Warren, man, if you look at him, 12% explosive rush rate last year, the year before, and he was hurt last year.
Yeah.
He was playing hurt. The year before that, 16%. Okay. Some of this is due to the snaps he gets and the alignment of the defense. So if you're playing on 3rd and long, it's easier to get a 10-yard carry, guys. So I realize that. That's part of what's going on here. But he's also been a plus as a receiver, 1.45 and 1.44 yards per route run. Those are running back one worthy. So a guy that's been explosive, a guy that has shown he can work in the passing game. And another one of these players that I think sometimes Freedman, folks think of him as being small. No, he's not small. Jaylen Warren is thick, THICC, thick. Like, there's a lot to like about this player. Caleb Johnson struggling a little bit early in training camp. And Caleb Johnson, the two things he didn't have in college, he was not explosive, did not have an explosive rush rate, and he did nothing in the passing game. So I'm not saying he won't do those things at the NFL level. Go back to the Kenneth Walker example. Wasn't used as a receiver in college, now used as a receiver in the NFL. So we don't always know the reasons behind those things. But I'll say this, Najee Harris was a 1st-round draft pick they had invested in.
Yeah.
They don't have as much invested in Caleb Johnson. I think Jaylen Warren has a better chance this year of being the starter for the Steelers than he did last year. And he's going in the same range to a little bit later in fantasy drafts. And I feel like that's a value.
I think that's accurate. And I'd also say the added factor of Aaron Rodgers, this offense has a shot of being better this year than it was last year. And I think Aaron Rodgers, it's just sort of known like the influence he has on personnel decisions and sort of like playing time decisions. He might actually prefer Jaylen Warren as the running back next to him instead of Caleb Johnson. Like, that's a possibility as well.
He does have a major say in who's lining up back there. Yeah. Peyton Manning used to do the same thing. You remember Donald Brown?
Damn it, Donald.
Yes. Damn it, Donald. Damn it, Donald could not get on the field despite having some explosive traits because
he was a first rounder.
Yeah, a late first rounder, yes. And Peyton Manning did not trust him, and he was not going to have it. It was a guy from Texas Tech that was stealing all those snaps from him. That was a late round. It was Ricky Williams. It was the Texas Tech Ricky Williams.
Yes.
Not the Ricky Williams from the University of Texas. So yeah, great pull by you there. So, hey guys, we really hope that you enjoyed this show. I know we went a little bit longer, but that's part of we can do that here. We can go 90 minutes. So give us your feedback though. If you want us to shorten it up, you want us to tighten it up, I promise I will get better at the screen sharing. And I thought I got better, Freedman. I thought I improved my game as we went along, learning how to, be the host. I've never hosted a show on my own. I started off in the industry with Brian Drake.
Oh, that's right.
Over at the Fantasy Football Hustle. There was no need for me to host. Brian is a silky smooth host. Then I worked with Ian Hartitz, who also is a great host. And then I worked with Kendall Valenzuela, who's a great host. And then I've done shows with you, and you're also a good host. So I've just never been one that's been asked to do hosting. So I'll try to continue to up my game in that way. But hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. Running backs with that breakout potential. For me, I'm looking for the guys that can catch those passes, looking for the explosive play rate, guys that you're taking later in your drafts. Freedman, I think, added a lot of great layers there, looking at the offensive environment. That's obviously a big thing, offensive line. So hope you got some good names. Got guys you can take early, middle rounds, late rounds. And until next time, we will see you.